Yes, good day. We continue with our Sqa Opm assignment brief, question number 2. Again, my guideline notes are in red and the actual question is in black. Question 2 is a pretty long question, but we can get it done nonetheless. So question 2. Within the chosen organization, the impact of productivity and workflow on the organization's competitiveness must be discussed. So the impact of productivity for any firm will surely have an impact on its competitiveness. So, productivity can be seen in a manufacturing sense as well as in a service-oriented type organization. All right. So productivity might relate to the level of efficiency in meeting the needs of your customer, in satisfying your customer, in reaching your targets, for example, from a production perspective, your target within the scheme of things in terms of, let's say, a car manufacturer, you might be scheduled to manufacture, let's say, 200 cars per day, all right? And if you don't meet those targets, it's likely to affect your business model, because in meeting those targets, these targets are linked to customer demand downstream. It's linked to forecasting data that was made available. All right. So anyway, this should be discussed in the context again of your organization. In whatever type of productivity will apply. The impact of productivity. I did give an example with Nestle, for example. Nestle not being able to produce the right quantities affected their schedules, affected customers downstream. All right. Impact of productivity. So again, this should be discussed in the context of the organization. Now, a surplus or decline in production, all right, must both be managed to meet the market requirement. So you can talk about that too. You can discuss a surplus in productivity. All right. I always have to go back to the situation we are in now. In certain industries or the demand for certain products decline significantly. All right. Why? Because again, the pandemic, right? So companies did end up with too much inventory, all right? Too much capacity, for example, right? So you can discuss productivity from a surplus perspective, and you can also discuss it from a non-surplus perspective, right? A deficit perspective. Good? As in the case of Nestle. So as for workflow or the process of design of the operation. So as for workflow or the process of design of the operation, if there are too many steps in the process or activities deemed to be unnecessary, this can also affect customer delivery and satisfaction, right? So I want us to talk about workflow as well. Workflow. Remember, we were talking about process design and product design. Workflow may very well relate to process design. All right. What are the steps defined to get a visa, a license? What are the steps outlined and defined, all right, to register at a university and so on? What are the steps and processes in place when you order at a fast food outlet? All right. So it can also hinder internal production rates. These are just examples. Share yours. So talk about workflow, talk about the impact workflow, or talk about the impact and the importance of workflow within your organization. And you can also, as I mentioned earlier, as I've been reminding you all, take the opportunity to talk about or to discuss the impact workflow had on other industries. For example, the fast food industry. McDonald's is a good example. Look at the movie The Founder, right? We see the impact workflow had on that organization. Workflow revolutionized the fast food industry, maybe starting with McDonald's, right? So we move on, we shift in gears. You must also conduct a critical evaluation of the way in which key operation strategies of the organization contribute to the business strategies of the enterprise. So how do you conduct a critical evaluation of that? Defining what an operation strategy might defining an operation strategy. And I must admit, I did say you can do that in question 1, right? But there's an opportunity to do it here. Again, defining what an operation strategy might be a good start. You may then move on to describing the operation strategy of your organization. Once both are known, you can then make the connection, right? Now, if I'm to go back to question 1, question 1 required you to give a brief insight of what I just spoke about, right? So you can go into more detail in question 2. So I don't want you to think that you're repeating yourself. In question 1, you should give a brief overview of the operation strategy. But in question 2, in dealing with this part of question 2, go into more detail, give more examples of how the operation strategy is aiding the organization, all right, in meeting its strategic goals, its long-term goals. The final part of this question, hold on. Well, there's one more part. With supply chains playing a key role in many operations, you must, through research, describe how a supply chain network design was developed to align or to contribute to the overall business strategy. Now, my notes. Every supply chain network was influenced by a strategy. In other words, an organization having a warehouse in Panama, or having a processing plant in Germany, or having their retailers in New Zealand, it's all done for a purpose. Or buying from suppliers in Johannesburg, it's all for a purpose, right? So every supply chain network was influenced by the strategy of the organization. Buying goods and services from a particular country might reduce cost. That might be a key agenda of the organization, trying to reduce cost throughout their supply chain, right? For example, setting up a repair shops or process plants overseas, or buying coffee from Asia, are all done based on the company's long-term plan. Agreed? You should agree. You must therefore discuss this with your organization, or within the context of your company, taking on center stage. Yes, you can again include other companies into the discussion, right? To compare. Start firstly with some definitions, or with a definition of supply chain and supply chain networks through, again, scholarship. So if I'm answering this question, this part of the question, the first thing I'll talk about is supply chain. All right, or supply chain management. I'll give a definition, and I'll talk about what is a supply chain network. And by the way, a supply chain network is just a complex supply chain, very complex, right? It's like a supply chain on steroids, if you ask me, right? That's what a supply chain network is, right? So that's that part of the question. And final part. Examples must also be discussed where the organization would have implemented the necessary performance indicators to ensure that monitoring, control, and continuous improvement within its operations become a standard best practice. Some research is required here. How does the organization ensure that they are on the right track? Yeah. So definitely benchmarking will become part of the conversation, right? And other measures that the organization may have in place to monitor their progress, right? Balance scorecards, for example. So you can also recommend areas that they can explore to do this in the event that they might be lacking in these areas. So, for example, if your research is indicating that the organization is not showing, or is not showing any signs of tracking their progress, or you just can't find the information, what do you do? Or if you choose your own company and you know for a fact that there's nothing like that in place, then you recommend, right? And again, if you cannot find such information for the company of your choice, recommend that the company do X, Y, and Z to monitor their process, right? If you don't monitor, then if things are going off, if things are not going as planned, you will not know, right? So you have to continuously audit, you have to continuously benchmark your organization with your competitors, with the leaders of the industry if you're not a leader, right? Getting constant feedback as well, that is another way of doing it, right? So I want you all to explore all of the above, right? I'm sure there are other ways of monitoring the progress. And in terms of Kaizen, for example, which is, well, in terms of continuous improvement, what is the organization doing to ensure that this is happening? Are they investing in new technology? Are they training their staff? All right. So again, examples must also be discussed where the organization would have implemented the necessary performance indicators to ensure that monitoring, control, and continuous improvement within the operation becomes standard best practice. What is the organization doing? Take note. All right. This is question number 2. Sqa Opm overview. Thank you.